We go live to Venezuela to hear further statements regarding the U.S. sanctions on the country. Let's listen.
Venezuela, I am here at the Ministry of the Popular Power for the Defense at the main headquarters, accompanied by all my brothers, partners of the state, of the military, of the Bolivarian Armed Forces, and besides their presence, I am accompanied by the Mr. General Commander of the Strategic Region of the Comprehensive Defense, Captain, and the Mr. Brigadier Commander and Head of the Bolivarian Armed Forces. And why did they accompany me? Commanders of operations and of the Mr. Commander General of the National Guard of Venezuela, Elio Estrada Paredes, they are here today with us because yesterday on a communique, on an outrageous communique by the Treasury Department of the United States, of fact by its acronym, they were designated these four compatriots, Bolivarian officials of the armed forces, through cohesive unilateral measures. These measures were broadened beyond the Bolivarian armed forces, as also officials and leaders of the National Electoral Council and the Supreme Court of Justice were designated as well. So the U.S. imperialism, the Department of State, the U.S. Department of State, the Treasury Department of State, and the whole leaders of Washington, they began to place, they began to stand cohesive positions and not dignified positions against an a democratic process here in Venezuela. So these partners that are being sanctioned as these kinds of cohesive unilateral measures are called, these heads of the U.S. imperialism, sponsored, pressed by the Venezuelan far-right fascist oligarchy that lives in Venezuela, that political opposition faction that have insurrectional traits, violent and far-right fascist traits. The U.S. imperialism believe that with these sanctions, with these measures, as they said, it is not to punish but to change or generate an imposing change in the people sanctioned. They believe that we have a price. They believe that we are an ethical, moral, structured state, guaranteed of the stability of the state, of the Venezuelan state. They believe that the Bolivarian armed forces, in which there is blood and the DNA of our liberators from 200 years ago, they think that with these cohesive unilateral sanctions, we will be kneeling down. We will the patriotic Bolivarian spirit will bend down. Our loyalty to our homeland. The U.S. imperialism doesn't get tired of doing rehearsals with the Bolivarian Venezuela. So they have imposed lots of unilateral cohesive measures, sanctions against countries worldwide. So they succeeded in some countries, and they think that that success is possible here in Venezuela. So, but here we cannot. Here we defend Venezuela. We have defended it over 24 years, 25 years. So in this new charter for aggression and for attacks by the U.S. imperialism, this new chapter that has emerged, by the way, on the brink of the U.S. elections. So this, the Venezuelan people is open to see face to face the U.S. imperialism and say to them that here we won't bend down, we won't surrender. Here it is a fight between the homeland sovereignty versus colonialism and neo-fascism. That is a battle waged after the July 28th, in which our President Nicolás Maduro Moro, Commander-in-Chief, resulted elected by the will of the Venezuelan people, and so its institutions did the right thing. So we know that all that this insurrectional plan was developed, was plotted before the elections. So we have already announced it. We were expecting these attacks. We suffered the cyber attack to the Electoral Council, and it began a new phase for resistance, for the fight, for the battle of the Venezuelan people, in which the far-right fascist opposition took to the streets to kill people, to murder, to injure people, to tear down, and to sabotage means of communications, schools, hospitals, etc., etc., etc. Plus the 25 deaths that due as a result of these violent waves by these criminals, by the political phenomenon that led the political phenomenon of the after the July 28th elections. So the plan of them was not electoral but an insurrectional, and so the response was immediate. The same day of elections, they started their cyber attack against the electoral system, and it began the emergence, resurgence of uprisings on the streets. All that was defeated, was counteracted by the will of the Venezuelan people, because the people voted for a consensus, the consensus of peace beyond the presidential elections. The people want peace to continue working, producing, to take children to school, to enjoy a health and welfare consolidated, and all these officers, General Estrada Paredes, commander of the National Guard, Major General or commander of the Strategic Region of Defense, and General Brito Hernandez, commander of it is the first combative line that was in the forefront on the streets, respecting the human rights with a lot of force to impose peace, the peace for which the Venezuelan people voted on July 28 presidential election. But the far-right fascist opposition, colonialist factors are trying to impose. So it is not by a random question. The U.S. departments elected well the military leaders that with their leadership, their moral, their ethics, went to the forefront to preserve peace in the country and to return the country the hope for moving forward amid all the things that we have to advance in the five transformations led by President Nicolás Maduro Moro. Says of the U.S. imperialism, your threats, your sanctions, all the measures, all the big psychological campaign unleashed against Venezuela between terrorism and misinformation campaigns, all of it make us to be on alert, that make us to generate a change, a positive change. Yes, I agree, but not in favor of your U.S. interests. It is a positive change in favor of our Bolivarian homeland that causes blood and fire to keep it, not only from 200 years ago, but on the latest 20 years, in the latest 10 years, the battles that we have been waging for our dignity. It is the oligarchy or the people. It is the imperialism over or the homeland, but it is the homeland. So we will set the path of the history of the path traced by our liberators to continue keep up fighting for this country to be prosperous, democratic, a country that progresses daily, a country that loves, feels, embraces, that supports other partners, other compatriots. It is a country that has a path set through work to reach always peace, to improve our democracy, our participatory and protagonist democracy. Here, the soldiers of our homeland are responding to the rude intervention of the U.S. imperialism. And what I am saying here, on Thursday we met. We held talks with all Bolivarian armed forces, and so I am collecting the voices of all the Bolivarian armed forces. It is not the leaders that you have been seeing here, but it is an armed forces that is every day more consolidated, more unbreakable in their spirit of fight. So those measures, you continue with your imperialist practices, but we are here raising our voices, walking strongly, dignified towards the future of Venezuela. And in this homeland there cannot be no other destiny, as we have said, but the peace, the everlasting peace, the peace for development. And so I have prepared a communique, an official communique that I am going to read immediately for the Venezuelan people know our stance, know our determination, and reinforce the knowledge of our most patriotic, admirable, glorious attitude in these times. So I am going to proceed to read the communique. The Bolivarian Armed Forces reject strongly the cohesive unilateral measures by the U.S. Office of FAC of the Treasury Department of the U.S. to 16 officials of the Venezuelan state, including military leaders and commanders of the Bolivarian institution. So, as a new rude interfering act, the U.S. imperialism intends to continue playing their role of police officers, taking actions, taking these outrageous actions, violating the legality and contrary to the international regulations, and violating the principle of self-determination of people in their purpose of overthrowing the legitimate government of Venezuela to install a puppet submitted to its ambition of appropriating our natural resources. And so they are against the leadership of the country, represented by the persons, General Commander and the Major General Estrada Paredes, Commander of the Major General Joan Alexander Lares, Commander of the Defense Strategic Region, and Asdrúbal José Britos Hernández, Commander of the Group of Actions of the Bolivarian. So for that, they employed the worn-out mechanism of sanctions, and they did it to affect those who are acting in defense of the Venezuelan people, are established the institutional peace after the far right tried to make a coup d'etat against the government. Once the opposition candidate was defeated, after they triggered a violent and fascist actions, which led regrettable deaths and injured. Besides the material damages, the Bolivarian Armed Forces expresses its solidarity with all public servers, and more especially its armed partners that are victims of these actions. Count on the historical force of soldiers who are not bribed or intimidated by the U.S. imperialism. So we will be standing up by your side to support you in all coming battles. So for the ones who offended you, we will continue defending you, and so we will be on alert to any threat against the independence and sovereignty of our nation, and so we will preserve the internal order of the country, reiterating that peace will be our most privileged victory, as Nicolas Maduro Moro, constitutional president, has expressed. Our commander-in-chief, who has ordered to impose the award of Venezuelan liberators to these four dignified patriots, officials of the Bolivarian Armed Forces. Long live Chavez! Chavez continues independence and socialist homeland. The son of Venezuela sets in the Essequibo, born in Venezuela. We will be loyal always, ever onward to victory. Thank you very much. So thank you for having listening to us. Every commander of the Bolivarian Armed Forces will be pronounced, and we will be hearing them. Thank you very much. Commander of the region of the the Bolivarian Armed Forces reject strongly the coercive unilateral measures imposed by the OFAC office of the U.S. Treasury Department of the United States to 16 officials of the Venezuelan state, including officials of the leaders of the Bolivarian forces. With this, interfering act, the United States continues to play the role of police officers of the world, taking these outrageous actions that disregard legality and violate international rights and the self-determination of the people in its aim to overthrow the Venezuelan government, to install a puppet that is subdued to the ambition of our largest natural resources. And so they applied this worn-out mechanism of sanctions, and they did it to affect those who have been acting in defense of the flagrant rights of the Venezuelan people and have established the peace in the whole territory of Venezuela. And after the far right made a plan to destabilize the government, so the Bolivarian Armed Forces expresses their solidarity with all public sectors and with our military partners who are victims of these illegalities. And so we are not going to be blackmailed or bribed or be intimidated by the U.S. imperialism. So we will be aligned to support you in these battles and the upcomings. So we will be civic united against any threats against independence, freedom of the nation, complying with the orders by citizen Nicolás Maduro, re-elected president legitimately by the Venezuelan people for the 2025-2031 term, our commander-in-chief of the Bolivarian Armed Forces. Chavez, long live Chavez, long live homeland. We will be always loyal. We will win. I am the General Major Manuel Enrique Castillo, commander of the strategic region of Los Andes number 2. The Bolivarian Armed Forces of the Andean region reject strongly the coercive unilateral measures imposed by the OFAC office of the U.S. Treasury Department to 16 officials of the Venezuelan state, that including military of the high command of our glorious Bolivarian Armed Forces. With this rude interfering act, the U.S. imperialism intends to continue assuming their role of global police, taking actions of this nature that lack the most elemental legality and are absolutely contrary to the regulations of the international right, and are violating the self-determination of the people. And so to overthrow the constitutional government of Venezuela, to install a puppet government manipulated for the ambition to obtain our largest natural resources, executing this aggression against the military leadership of our country with the cohesive mechanism of the so-called sanctions and blockade. They do it to affect those who, acting in defense of the flagrant rights of the Venezuelan people, established peace nationwide after those far-right fascist opposition implemented their plan of destabilization after due to their defeat on the presidential elections. So they triggered violent and vandalizing actions with the so-called comanditos of terror that led a regrettable number of deaths and injured, plus its material damages. So the strength of the soldiers, women and men, we are not going to be we won't let blackmail bribe by the lackeys. So we will always support you in this battle and others, and we are on alert before any threats against freedom and sovereignty of the nation, and complying with the orders of the constitutional president of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moro, our commander-in-chief, re-elected by the Venezuelan people and proclaimed by the National Electoral Council and validated by the Supreme Court of Justice for the term for the 2025-2031 term. And so we will we will continue with the sacrifice, and we will continue with the example of our historical martyrs, dear leaders, heroes. And so we will preserving the interests of the homeland, strengthening and preserving the legacy of our Supreme Commander Hugo Chavez of being free, sovereign, and independent, whatever it costs. Long live Chavez! Homeland continues. We will be always loyal. We will win. Lenin Lorenzo, commander of the strategic region of Comprehensive Defense Number 3 of the in the state of Guárico. The National Bolivarian Armed Forces strongly reject the coercive unilateral measures imposed by the OFAC office of the U.S. Treasury Department to the 16 officials of the Venezuelan state, including generals and high commanders of the Bolivarian Armed Forces. The U.S. imperialism intends to continue playing the global police role, lacking the most elemental legality and absolutely contrary to the regulations of the international right, and violating the self-determination of the peoples, and with the purpose of overthrowing the legitimate government of Venezuela to install a puppet that is responding to his ambition of appropriating our largest natural resources. And so they apply that, they wanted to achieve that with the mechanism of sanctions, and they try to undermine those who are acting in defense of the Venezuelan people. And so as these dignified people establish peace after the far-right opposition triggered violent actions because of the defeat of opposition González Urrutia. So they committed vandalizing acts led by comanditos, causing a regrettable figure of deaths and injured, plus material damages. So the Bolivarian Armed Forces expresses its solidarity, their solidarity with public servers, and especially with its partners of arms, which are victims of these unjust sanctions. And so count on the on our strength, that we are not blackmailed or intimidated by the U.S. imperialism. So we will be at your side to support you in this and the future battles. We will continue with our unity, be on alert of any threats against the sovereignty and independence of the nation, and in compliance comply with the orders by our commander-in-chief and constitutional president Nicolás Maduro Moros, re-elected by the sovereign people and proclaimed by the National Electoral Council and ratified by the Supreme Court of Justice for the 2025-2031 term. So we will preserve at all costs the internal order of the country, inspired by the thought of Simón Bolívar, the man of honor, the human being of honor, has no other homeland in that the one that it is respected, the sacred character of humanity. So together with the Venezuelan people, we are willing to do a free homeland. Long live Chavez! Independence and socialist homeland. Loyal always, traitors never. From the strategic region of the central area of our Bolivarian Armed Forces, we reject strongly the cohesive unilateral measures imposed by the OFAC office of the U.S. Treasury Department. To 16 officials, including the military leaders of the Bolivarian Armed Forces. These measures that constitute an act of aggression against our sovereignty are not acceptable, as they violate the international right and the self-determination. So the imposition of unilateral sanctions not only affects our country, but also it has repercussions, aftermaths in the life of our people, as they are affected economically. And so these sanctions have brought suffering and destabilization in different areas of the planet. So their arrogance of imposing sanctions not only disregard the self-determination of the people, but also perpetrates cycles of violence and inequality. So they behave as enemies of our homeland, and they persist in their purpose of placing a puppet that be subdued to them and to appropriate our natural resources, promoting violence as they did it on July. Through the violent comanditos, they provoke the bloodbath of our Venezuelan people. Our Bolivarian Armed Forces will be united and be steadfast in the defense of our beloved homeland and in the rights of the people. We will continue working to strengthen our sovereignty and to face any menace that searches to undermine our freedom and sovereignty. We reiterate our solidarity with all public sectors and especially with our military that are being victim of those sanctions. We will be united with the people. Side by side, our Commander-in-Chief, Constitutional President of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moro, re-elected by the popular power through the 28 July elections for the 2025-2031 term. Long live Chavez! Loyal always. This equipo is ours. We will win.
Mayor General
Major General, commander of the Eastern Network. And so our commemorating our general and here tenant from the members of the strategic region of the eastern area of the Bolivarian Armed Forces made up of in Suate, Sucre, and Morava states. We are completely united and we reject strongly the cohesive unilateral measures decreed by the OFAC office of the U.S. Treasury Department against 16 Venezuelan officials, including the leaders of the Bolivarian Armed Forces. Once again, the U.S. imperialism attacks the Venezuela with its interfering agenda by sanctioning dignified officials and attempted against the stability of the homeland. This measure violates international democracy and attempt against the Bolivarian government. So the Bolivarian Armed Forces do not obey any external actor that intends to generate destabilization chaos, to install alternate governments, puppets of them, to deliver the Venezuelan resources. The threats, blackmails, and coercion do not undermine our moral strengths forces, and so we will be defending the Venezuelan sovereignty and independence, and so we will comply with our oath of defending our sovereignty and serving the homeland till the end of our lives. So we will keep up our loyalty to Commander-in-Chief and Constitutional President Nicolás Maduro Moros, legitimately re-elected by the majority of the Venezuelan people in the last elections of July 28th. For the 2025-2031 term. So in that regard, we will continue vigilant and on permanent alert in the face of any destabilization attempt by the far-right fascist factors that are trying to undermine the participatory and protagonist democracy of the Venezuelan people. So we expressed that the Bolivarian Armed Forces do not obey any orders of the foreign governments. So we are loyal to the Venezuelan people's will, and we will be alert with our forces and equipment in the comprehensive defense of our country. The victory, long live Chavez. Loyal always, we will win. Major General Prieto Martinez, Commander the Bolivarian Armed Forces from the number 6 area. On behalf of the Venezuelan people, we strongly reject the cohesive unilateral sanctions in which the OFAC office, U.S. Treasury Department, imposed this Thursday sanctions against 16 officials of the Venezuelan state, including military leaders of the Bolivarian Armed Forces. So we described as an aggressive act of the imperialism, as they believe to be global police, taking actions lacking the disregarding international rights in their purpose to overthrow the legitimate government of Venezuela. So they intend to appropriate our natural resources, placing a puppet to govern for governing through him. So as the opposition leader has been defeated, and then they led violent actions through comanditos of the opposition of Venezuela, leaving the regrettable results with deaths and injured. So the Bolivarian Armed Forces and the security entities express that in this kind of coup-mongering attempts, we will respond steadfast to establish the internal order and defeat any threat to preserve peace. That is and will be our main victory. We will be united with the police to support each sanction that are fighting for the flavor rights of the Venezuelan people, and so we will continue our work for Venezuela to be free and independent and sovereign. So we express our commitment to President and Commander-in-Chief of the Bolivarian Armed Forces, Nicolás Maduro Moros, re-elected president by the popular power and proclaimed by the National Electoral Council and ratified by the Supreme Court of Justice for the 2025-2031 term. So since Guyana, we reiterate the whole world that in Venezuela will reign justice, equality, and freedom. That's the magic formula for the lives of the nations. Long live Chavez! Independence and socialism homeland. The son of Venezuela is born in this Essequibo. We are loyal always, ever and war to victory. Chavez lives. So, leader and commander of the strategic region of Guardians of the Blue Venezuelan, from the square of Supreme Commander Rafael Chavez Frias, we want to express the Venezuelan people that we reject the unilateral and cohesive sanctions imposed by the United States government through the OFAC office and by the U.S. Treasury Department against 16 officials, including the leaders of the military of the Bolivarian Armed Forces, of whom we admired, as they have an example. They have example careers, and so we supported. We provide our support to them. So the United States continue their intimidating acts, undermining our officials with the purpose of overthrowing the legitimate constitutional president of Venezuela and disregard the Venezuelan people's wills that in elections re-elected the citizen Nicolás Maduro Moro to be their president for the 2025-2031 term, proclaimed by the National Electoral Council and ratified by the Supreme Court of Justice. We have been witnessing the transparency of the electoral process, and so we reject the objectives of creating confusion and of installing a puppet government controlled by the U.S. imperialism. So the opposition has opted for terrorism violence led by the comanditos, who we have managed to dismantle. By the fascists continue their destabilizing plans as they want to appropriate our resources to favor the U.S. interests, the economic interests of the United States. So as real we will continue resisting the aggressions of the empire, and so we will defend sovereignty, independence, peace. Our triumph consists in the peace for all Venezuelans. Enough for interventions, enough cohesive sanctions, enough of fascism. Respect the will of the Venezuelan people. Our victory will always be the peace. The maritime network ratified, we ratified our absolute loyalty to re-elected President and Commander-in-Chief Nicolás Maduro Moros, so we owe him obedience and loyalty. Long live peace. Long live Chavez. Long live homeland. We will be always loyal. The strategic region of comprehensive defense rejects in its most energetic terms the new unilateral cohesive measures that are illegitimate and illegal imposed by the OFAC office of the U.S. Treasury Department against Venezuela, directed to a group of officials, including leaders of the Bolivarian Armed Forces, demonstrating their contempt for the international right, the self-determination of the peoples, and the democratic will of the Venezuelans, in a rude act that ingratiates to a rotten political class that have practiced terrorism acts to overthrow the Venezuelan democracy, and so they want to impose the country their political imperial policies with the purpose of installing puppets who are not going to win in a homeland like ours. So the U.S. imperialist has been accountable for bloody crimes, and they disregard the needs of their own citizens. But here in Venezuela, we have our Bolivarian armed forces are unbreakable and loyal, and will set for the peace and welfare of the Venezuelan people, strengthening its constitutionality and consolidating its participatory and protagonist democracy. We ratified alongside the police our absolute loyalty to this government system, which has been legitimately constituted, its institutions, and especially our commander-in-chief, Nicolás Maduro Moros, re-elected constitutional president till 2031, who has been re-elected by the popular power, reaffirmed by the National Electoral Council, and validated by the Supreme Court of Justice. Do not forget that Liberator Simón Bolívar sentenced. By fortunately, we have seen a free man defend powerful empires. Chavez, long live Chavez. The homeland will continue.
And we were listening to the statement from the National Armed Forces in Venezuela that started with Minister Vladimir Padrino Lopez. The main topic of the message is to reject the newly imposed U.S. sanctions, and also a call to sovereignty, to defend the sovereignty of the Venezuelan nation. In this way, the armed forces, led by Padrino Lopez, but also by all the different leaders of the branches of the armed forces, were reiterating their commitment to the homeland, their state of alert and unity in the face of what they consider a threat from U.S. imperialism. So they stand by the democratic process that Venezuela has gone through during the elections of the July 28th. They remain in that position and firmly reject the U.S. sanctions that were announced in the last hours. So we will come back to you with more upcoming news in the upcoming news. Please stay tuned with teleSUR English.